Donald Trump's secret efforts to reach a settlement with himself, in essence, with the IRS that he has weaponized and controls, is being exposed right now in a pretty innocuous status conference statement that was filed in a federal court involving the case where Donald Trump sued the United States government, where he sits as the commander-in-chief of Article 2 in theory, although he doesn't behave like that. He sued the federal government and he sued the IRS for $10 billion or more back in February, saying that there was a massive data breach case in the past 5 years where lots of people, actually it was tens of thousands, if not more, of Americans' information was exposed in a kind of a data breach situation by a federal government employee. And Trump was one of the individuals purportedly whose information was part of a broader data breach situation within the federal government. Well, Trump says the fact that his tax information may have been exposed to a data breach entitled him to $10 billion. By the way, that would naturally mean if your information was part of that data breach, which it may be because there was lots of Americans whose information was, in theory, everybody, if they brought a class action, should get $10 billion each. Now, I should note that normally in the past, presidents of the United States made public their tax returns in general. It wasn't something that they hid. It was something that they weren't required to turn over by law, but voluntarily going back to, I think, Nixon and even perhaps before then, this was just something that presidents and people running for the presidency would do because we would want to make sure there's no entanglements, there's no emolument violations, there's no investments or compromise or ways that private companies or individuals or entities or foreign governments or your own investment interests could compromise you. The very idea that a president would not make public their tax returns before Trump was in and of itself a disqualifying factor based on how presidential campaigns used to take place. That kind of stopped with Donald Trump. And you'll recall during Donald Trump's first term, lots of efforts were made when the Democrats had control over the House to make available Donald Trump's tax returns. And finally, when they were ordered, the case went all the way up to the Supreme Court. It turned out, surprise, surprise, that at least through, I think it was 2020 or so, Donald Trump paid very little taxes. Many years it was $0. Some years it was $750, or it was very de minimis amounts of money that were actually paid in taxes. So it wasn't just that he paid lower percentage of taxes. He paid less taxes than teachers and truck drivers and farmers. I mean, actually dollar for dollar. But anyway, that was discovered then. This is a separate issue, a broader data breach case. And he's claiming $10 billion in damages. He sued the government back in February. And then lots of people were saying, so what are you going to do? Like, are you going to, now that you're suing the government, are you going to make the government settle with you and give you $10 billion? And Trump was like, yeah, that's exactly my plan. I'm going to make taxpayers, everybody watching this, pay $10 billion to Donald Trump directly to settle his injury, since he's basically negotiating with himself. So while your health care is being ripped away, while you are struggling to pay rent, while the government agencies are being destroyed, while, money's going to fund unlawful and catastrophic wars. Also, Donald Trump is going to settle with himself and write himself a $10 billion check. Now, Trump says, I'm not going to write it to myself. I'm going to take it and then I'm going to donate it. Okay, so now you're going to use it as a deduction, so you never have to pay taxes ever again in the future. So you're going to take our taxpayer dollars, take it, and then use it as a tax deduction. So when he says, I'm going to give it to charity, you're going to then deduct it from your other payments, so you'll never have to pay any taxes ever again, basically forever. So there are secret discussions taking place, though, for Donald Trump to reach this settlement right now. And we have the document. It's document 40 in this case that Trump filed in the Southern District of Florida. Here it is, the Miami division. And here's the case. It's Donald Trump, Eric Trump, the Trump Organization, Don Jr., versus the IRS and the US Department of Treasury. I mean, just how sick, like how disgusting is that? Even a lawsuit's being brought by the current sitting commander in chief. And here's what it says. Plaintiff Donald Trump and the other plaintiffs in this case respectfully move this court with the consent of defendants, the IRS and the Department of Treasury. In other words, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, you know, the guy who you see who goes, oh, Donald Trump is so smart. And that's who is leading the case for the Department of Treasury. So what they're asking for right here is, Judge, can you please grant an extension for a period of 90 days in all proceedings in this matter? In support, plaintiff state as follows. The action filed, it was actually right around February, January 29, 2026. It was served in February. Asserts claims under 26 USC section 7431 for unauthorized inspection and disclosure of plaintiff's tax returns and return information. Plaintiffs state in their complaint that the IRS contractor and or employee unlawfully accessed and disclosed vast amounts of confidential tax return information belonging to plaintiffs and their affiliated entities. These claims involve complex questions of liability. This case remains in the early stages. Good cause exists to grant an extension in this matter while the parties engage in discussions designed to resolve this matter and to avoid protracted litigation. This limited pause will neither prejudice the parties nor delay ultimate resolution. Rather, the extension will promote judicial economy and allow the parties to explore avenues that could narrow or resolve the issues efficiently. Then it says, good cause supports the 90-day extension. Courts routinely grant extension motions, whereas here, an extension serves the interest of the justice and efficiency without harming any parties. The parties are engaging in discussions and need time to work through to ensure those discussions can take place productively to avoid protracted litigation. This brief period will allow the parties to initiate and structure those discussions in a manner that best serves the interest of the parties and the court. The requested 90-day extension is narrowly tailored to permit the parties to complete these foundational steps so that the subsequent proceedings, whether discovery, dispositive motions, or otherwise, can move forward efficiently and without the need for repeated extensions. None of the parties will suffer prejudice right here. And it goes on to say an extension will conserve judicial and party resources and avoid piecemeal litigation that could arise if these parties are not allowed to have these discussions. And it goes on to talk about how, for the foregoing reasons, they're requesting 90 days. By the way, this is before Judge Kathleen Mary Williams. She's the district court judge in the Southern District of Florida. She is a no-nonsense judge appointed by former President Barack Obama in July of 2010. She's handled a number of very notable cases, including a case that was temporarily stopping the Everglades Detention Center and being built out based on its harm to indigenous communities. She's not afraid to make tough rulings. And I just want to bring in right now Harry Litman from the Talking Feds YouTube channel, Talking Feds Substack and podcast. I mean, Harry, I know the people have gotten so numb, sadly, to the cacophony of all of the Trump chaos and craziness and the destruction, frankly, of our judicial system, our alliances, of everything. The mere idea that Obama would sue the government, Biden would sue the government, and then make filings about settlement discussions taking place would not just be impeachable. Let's face it, it would probably, in many people's opinions, be criminal in and of itself as the biggest abuse of discretion. Like Putin probably isn't as brazen in doing some of this stuff, or Orban wasn't. It's so ridiculous that it almost seems like a skit from the movie Idiocracy. But this is real life. This is a real filing and in front of a very serious judge who I wonder how she responds to a case like this, because Harry, one of the things that we always learned about first year of law school, for there to be Article 3 standing, there needs to be a case in controversy. You can't just bring fun, like, excursions in front of judges with your buddies like me and Harry. Just say, Judge, can you resolve this? They're making a mockery of the court. They're making a mockery of what she does, what our system does. So how do you make sense of all of this, Harry?
They really are. And it's because the Trump administration is so eager to be in bed with what should be adversaries and opponents of the United States. This is what they did with Bannon. This is what they did with Flynn. They pretend United States v. Flynn, United States v. Bannon, but they're doing what I've called in a series of Substacks, jumping the V. They're on the same side. So when it comes to Michael Flynn, after his unjust pardon, brings a lawsuit that he's not allowed to win unless he has prevailed in the case. He hasn't. He pleaded guilty twice. But since it's the administration versus the buddy of the administration, he hops over to that side of the V, and they just say, what's a 1.25 million between friends. And then, so likewise here, look, I'm trying to imagine a situation, a post office truck hits a president. It's conceivable that there'd be a legitimate suit, but the whole point here is this is the Trump administration where Trump calls the shots and everyone is dedicated to his personal interest. Can you imagine how these settlement discussions that they're asking for work? Let's put Trump on one side and whatever cowed, even cabinet member on the other, Scott Bessent or Todd Blanche, what do you want, boss? Otherwise you're going to fire me, right? And by the way, when they settle, so a court can't consider, as you say, there's no jurisdiction over a so-called collusive lawsuit. It's not a case or controversy, but they file a piece of paper and then they go off and settle. And one friend says to the other, hey, how'd you like to help yourself to a wheelbarrow full of cash from the Treasury? Go for it, and we'll call it a settlement. Normally, of course, what happens is that you are stewards of the taxpayers and the fisc, and you think about your exposure soberly and you fight back and you push. This is what the Department of Justice did in the first instance with Flynn's ridiculous suit saying, give me money because you maliciously prosecuted. By the way, while I'm fomenting on this point, I think you're going to see just these kinds of suits from the friggin' 12 Proud Boys and Oath Keepers whose convictions for seditious conspiracy have just been whitewashed from history under the Department of Justice. Where to start? So first, as you say, it's a joke for starters because he not only didn't disclose his taxes, but he bobbed and weaved and teased and said he would, and it shouldn't be in this position. Period. But but also the irony is his government has done all it can to give, especially in the service of its immigration over the top initiative, that private information, social security information, whatever that, and for voting, they have rated and been responsible for the disclosure of private information of really everyone. Just imagine if we actually had not only his tax, but the real picture of his financial transactions here, the maybe billions of dollars that he and his family have made in rank violation of the emoluments clause just in the last couple years. It's really been the only time Donald Trump's ever been successful in business is when he's been raiding the federal treasury. But this bottom line point is the one you made. Suits are where one side goes against the other, and settlements are where they rationally evaluate their exposure. $10 billion, that's just a number that Trump can say, and the people on the other side who should be protecting that money are completely cowed and will be saying it might not even be revealed settlements sometimes. It's just like, yes, sir, to go in there and take all you want. That's how it works in the Trump administration. It wouldn't work that way in other administrations if everyone was supposed to be doing their job. But job number 1 through 10 in this administration is serve Donald Trump's personal interests. And what could serve it better than, they just a huge chunk of change from the federal, from your and my tax dollars. It's like a brazen outrage in 6 different ways.
So what happens next, Harry? They ask for a 90-day extension right here. You have these conversations going on behind the scenes. Obviously, with Democrats take control in the midterms, this is going to be a major part of the oversight. What were these communications and conversations? Right. I think it's going to be a big deal. Obviously, if this went through, I do think even with a very numb and disinformation injected populace, to me, this would get through, I think, a little bit, that he paid himself $10 billion, personally. What do you look?
What's going to happen? I'll tell you what's not. Sorry, go ahead.
I think he creates a structure. I mean, I think in his own mind, he creates a charitable structure because he knows if he pocketed it directly, it would be too direct. So I think what he does is he thinks that people won't realize that he's going to use this as a deduction. So with all of the other grifts that he's pulled in, he's going to basically pay no taxes on that by offsetting it with the taxpayer dollars that he contributes to his presidential library. That's 100% deductible. And so then he builds a building that he then charges, which his library is actually a hotel and a building that he now funnels $10 billion into. I think I know him well enough to think that that's probably what his plan is, but you go tell me.
Well, I'll tell you what's not going to happen. When they normally would ask for 90 days in the court, what would ensue is, 4 lawyers in a briefcase on this side and 4 lawyers with briefcases on that side, and hard adversary negotiations about what makes sense and what settlement exposure. Ain't going to be none of that because it's all one team sort of masquerading as adversaries. That's for starters. By the way, he's pulling the same trick. He wants to get $230 million is the figure that he's pulled out of his, for being prosecuted. And there again, you have to show that there wasn't probable cause and you were actually innocent. He can't show any of those things. But when you make it to the point of settlement, and you know this well, Ben, so many, cases end that way, they can sometimes even be brought under seal. The real flaw here is, it'd be one thing if they were going to a judge decision, jury trial, and that they were basically, taking a dive. But here you don't even have to do that. You're just friends on the same side in one room, saying here's some money, and there might even be a way to try to keep it secret. I agree with you. There are certain things that Trump does that just seem calculated to make people's gaskets, just spin around. This one seems like, give me a friggin' break. But, there's what could you ever put past him? Anyway, it's going to be collusive, whatever happens, because the whole thing is collusive. It's going to be Trump and people who work for Trump and know they better please Trump deciding together how to solve this case. So, it's like a carny game.
Everybody subscribe to Harry Litman's YouTube channel, Talking Feds YouTube, Talking Feds Substack, Talking Feds Podcast. Thanks, Harry.
Thanks, Ben.
Want to stay plugged in? Become a subscriber to our Substack at MeidasPlus.com. You'll get daily recaps from Ron Filipkowski, ad-free episodes of our podcast, and more exclusive content only available at MeidasPlus.com.